Welcome back. Our last lesson, we saw our first, or actually two deaths in the play, and really building towards that tragic ending of the play. What I want to talk about this time is cause and effect. Because in a tragedy, we know that we have to have things that are probable, not merely possible. For a comedy, there is possibility, but for a tragedy, probability. So we need to talk about cause and effect here. Things that happen in the play, death of Mercutio, death of Tybalt, all this believable would have happened. The play starts asking questions. What caused one thing to happen? For the death of Tybalt and Mercutio, we could ask, was it misunderstanding? But the play offers a lot of ideas, and it's interesting. It's on line Act 3, line 4. For now, these hot days is the mad blood stirring. It's in July, it's very hot outside, but think about it, it's not just the heat, it's nature, it's something in human nature that brought the violence. Is that what it is? And quickly following Romeo's killing of Tybalt, we can jump ahead a little bit and talk about when Juliet finds out the news. She too begins to wonder about cause and effect in scene 2 around lines 105 or so, and she goes, "My husband lives, that Tybalt would have slain, and Tybalt's dead, that would have slain my husband. Wherefore should I weep them? So some word there was, worser, that murdered me." And then she talks about this one word, and the word is banishment. So that's the idea of the cause, and that might be because we see in line 75, the same scene, that she's talking about the serpent, and she's referring to the serpent heart hid with a flowering face. She's talking about the serpent from the Garden of Eden, something about banishment. If you know a little bit about the story of the Garden of Eden, it's Adam and Eve in the garden, don't eat from the tree. Then there's a serpent in the tree and entices Eve, so take from the fruit, she eats it, and then she goes and gives it to Adam, and that angers God, and he banishes them from the Garden of Eden. Now, is that the cause of the violence in this play? Our original banishment from the Garden of Eden? Or there is another idea of what has caused as well. When we go to the idea for Romeo, what has happened? He says, is it some part of a name that's in my anatomy? It's in the following scene, line 106. He's talking as if that name, in what vile part of this anatomy does my name lodge? The idea of names or written language, is that something that comes from history? Is that the history of men, the history of violence that brought the death of Mercutio and of Tybalt? So what is the cause and effect? So the play does this and adds to the tragic element because they have to be believable, probable. I believe that this could have happened. Misunderstandings, the hate, the banishment, histories of violence, all of these things are actually the cause. Okay, let's step back to right after Romeo has killed Tybalt and Mercutio's dead. So the prince arrives, and earlier the prince was in Act 1, there was violence, and here we have the parallel scene. So the prince shows after the violence, but this time people actually dead. 152 or so, Benvolio goes through the very long monologue, and he says what's happened. He explains what happened, and that is almost like a mock trial. Benvolio, he's an eyewitness, and he is reporting in the trial, and the prince was the judge. So, and here what happens. Right after he speaks, because he actually did see what happened, and what he saw was accurate, then Lady Capulet, she takes the stand to give her testimony, but her testimony is a false testimony. She says, Some 20 of them fought in this black strife, and all those 20 could but kill one life. We know that's not true. They were not 20 people. It was Romeo, Benvolio, Mercutio, and Tybalt 4. Lady Capulet wasn't even there. That's false testimony. Following her speaking, Montague speaks, Romeo's father, and you can think of him as speaking in Romeo's defense in this mock trial. In his defense, he speaks about Romeo's motivation, which is something we do in murder trial. What was his motive for committing this crime? Montague says, "Not Romeo, Prince, he was Mercutio's friend. His fault concludes, but what the law should end." So this Tybalt was the motivation. And then the prince speaks, and like a judge, he gives his verdict, but the verdict is not the death sentence. The verdict is exile or banishment. I think that's an interesting way to read this scene, like a mock trial. Right after this mock trial, we go to scene 2, and that's Juliet, and she doesn't know what's going on, and she's waiting for Romeo. Remember, they just got married that morning. It's their wedding night. They need to and want to consummate this wedding, consummate this marriage, and she calls out for the night to come multiple times. "Come, civil night, gallop apace, come night, come Romeo, come thou," so on and so forth. She's ready for him to come, but of course, the sad thing is that he will not be coming. He has been banished, and the nurse comes and she informs Juliet of this. This is one of those things we call an egnoresis, a point of discovery, when she realizes that he has been banished. Well, I love the way she learns about the banishment and how she and the nurse speak about this. If you look at just the exclamation points, just the punctuation marks at the end of the sentence, that starts around line 90. "For such a wish!" exclamation point. And a question mark, and a question mark from Juliet, and a question mark from Juliet. And we go to next page, question, question, exclamation, exclamation. Series of questions and series of exclamatory remarks, really building the tension in the play. And it builds more rapidly because in the next scene, it's Romeo. And we notice that Romeo speaks in the same structure. If we look just in punctuation marks and exclamation marks in line 4 of scene 3. What news? What is the princess doing? I yet no, not question, 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 exclamation, exclamation. We go to next point, and that's the same structure, the same all over again of the previous scene as well. And if we go to Juliet in the previous scene again, we find another parallel. If you remember earlier in the play, Romeo, speaking of all love and the use of oxymorons. Look at Juliet in Act 3, scene 2. She uses the same time of language as Romeo. This is around line 73. So she says, "Beautiful tyrant, fiend angelical, dove feather driven, wolfish ravening lamb, despised substance of divinest show, damned saint, honorable villain." Oxymoron, 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 as well as the use of questions and exclamations, Romeo and Juliet. And we think of how they respond to what happened. And the response is shown through their language. The language is parallel, and in that way we can see that Romeo and Juliet are not married physically, but they are married through their language, the way they speak. Okay, let's pause there. We'll pick it up in the next lesson.